Good evening, everyone. My name is Floyd Ruskin with Don't Mess with the Don. Don't Mess with the Don is an all-volunteer charitable Canadian charity committed to protecting and enhancing the natural heritage of the Don Valley and Toronto ravines. We've been blessed with the wonderful green space in Toronto, and at Don't Mess with the Don, we look at it as our obligation to protect it from not only natural enemies like invasive plants and trees, but from man-made intrusions, unnecessary man-made intrusions as well. We're happy to share this with you. Um, Joining me tonight for the presentation is a terrific valley and ravine advocate. Chris Williams lives nearby and has worked diligently to find out more and more about why this facility is going, why Metrolinx chose to put this facility in the location in accessible ravine parkland. Now, just a bit of background. Almost exactly 2 years ago, in February 2020, Metrolinx announced their plans for GO expansion across the region. This facility is only one small part of that. And a lot of this Chris will touch on in more depth as we go along. And in our area, the east, central east part of Toronto, there were two presentations done, one in the West Donlands and one at Evergreen. About 30 people presented at that. And as I said, the Don Valley Layover and Service Facility was just one small part of this very massive GO expansion across the region. We sent out, after finding out that Metrolinx planned to build in this location in the Don Valley, our first letter went to Metrolinx on March the 8th, and was responded to on May the 12th. And that's just this symptomatic of the way Metrolinx operates and treats community and environmental concerns. So there's lots to talk about tonight. We're gonna have to move on. Chris and I are trying to leave enough room for people to ask questions. What's important to you, and because we already know what's important to us. So send your questions in. I guess I do it through the chat, Irene. Questions? Okay. Well, like, what is it? The layover? Well, Metrolinx decided they need to a place to park 3 diesel trains. These diesel trains service one place, and that's the Milton line. It's designed to be a layover for off-peak hours. So a train comes, train comes in from Milton in the morning with commuters, drops off their passengers, and instead of deadheading back to Milton because there's other trains coming back, they need some place to store these trains during the non-peak hours, and then they run back to Milton in the evening. The facility itself, the infrastructure, is built on an 85-foot long and an elevated 10-meter high base topped with a building for staff and service equipment. There's a parking lot, and this is always striking why a transit facility needs to have a parking lot. There's a ramp to get from the trail level to the track level, and there has to be Metrolinx claims there has to be an access road off of the Don Valley connector. Part of this process is the electrification of the Richmond Hill line to Pottery Road, and more than likely this will become a storage on the west side of the valley for the electric trains. Replacement of the low rail bridge across the Don River, and this is something that actually struck us very similar. The Metrolinx put a request for tender on December the 19th of 2021, and it actually closes on Friday. And it was the first mention of the replacement of this 130-year-old bridge. It was never mentioned previously in any of their documentation, and it was quite a surprise. But once again, this is the the culture of Metrolinx is not to share information with either the community and unfortunately with our elected representatives as well. And that's really a tragedy. The reactivation of the CP Don Branch rails along from Corktown Common to it's called the Half Mile Bridge over the Don. If you've gone up and down the Parkway or Bayview, it's that older bridge along that you see that near the brickworks. Demolition and removal of existing track. And once again, this comes back to the way Metrolinx is disingenuous in their information. On their blog, they have this great sign this great sign says a new use for an old track, but they're not reusing it. When we think of reuse, we think of our 3 R's: reuse and recycle, and they're not doing any of that because they're going to take it to remove the existing track and then build 1.6 kilometers of a new trackside walkway, which doesn't exist now, a brand new track bed, new under-track utilities, new rail, and a new trackside service road. This whole thing will actually be moving slightly west from its present location. So they're not staying within they're not even staying within the rails that are there. And then, which is really disturbing because the Lower Don Valley is a heavily used wildlife migration route. There's security fencing around, not only around the perimeter, but blocking off access, most access throughout the valley.
Take the next slide there.
We've been fortunate to be supported by our local elected representatives. I saw Julie DeBruson is on here who supported us. Peter Tabbins has been a great support. Mike Layton from the west side of the valley. Jessica Bell from the other from the west side. But I think the majority of the support that we've gotten is from Council Paula Fletcher. And I asked her to write a brief a couple of lines of why it's important. I don't need to read it for you. Just take a moment to read it. But she really does amplify what the Don Valley means to the folks at Don't Mess with the Don and other people that cherish the green space.
Yeah, so let me just jump in here and sort of talk a little bit about sort of the overall project. Metrolinx actually does provide a very extensive, what they call full business case. Many pages that were released in 2018. It looks like a very highly polished document, and it explains the rationale behind why they need to build this out, what is the funding, where's the money coming from, and they look at quite a lot of statistics to try and make a rationale for the project. For us to go through that in detail tonight would be literally impossible. It's a massive document. So we've provided a link to it there, and of course you can easily find it by Googling it online. But it is worthwhile having a look at because it gives you some very important details around the project itself. So what I wanted to do was just touch on some of them very briefly, because they're really pertinent to understanding how this fits into the overall scheme of what's going on. And there's a lot of confusion as well, in the sense that there's also the Ontario line and there's the Scarborough line. There's literally $80 billion worth of transit being built in the area. GO expansion is just one part of that. But the Don Valley Layover and the associated areas, which we're calling the Don Valley Complex, is just the $16.8 billion part of that. That is helping out for the GO commuter rail service. So we can have a look at the next slide here. Sorry, next slide, please.
Just a second. I think people would like to see as well where the planned extension is going to happen.
I believe there is some photos of that.
Yeah, maybe if we can jump just to a map.
This slide here, we'll come back to this one.
Yep.
Yep.
Because I think it's good for people to start off with the map.
Yeah, so here's the map. So one of the things is that there's two things. There's one is calling it the Don Valley Layover, which is very specifically the 3 diesel trains that are being parked in the area where the arrow is right now. On top of that is an additional piece, which is the service facility that comes along with it. Then there's another piece, which is the access road, which is, for emergency vehicles to come in and also for any employees that need to drive in or out for whatever reason, which is the reason for the parking lot. Then there's the next part, which is the access rails, and this is how the trains come northward up the valley towards the layover part. The next one is the bridge over the trail. This is the Belleville overpass where the cycling trail is, and that's already been built. The next piece is the bridge over the river, which Floyd mentions, very old bridge. And this is all new to us, these parts that, and the access rails that come up from Corktown Common. Now on the Richmond Hill side, or the west side of the river, they're planning to electrify those rails. Even though the Richmond Hill line is a diesel line, they are electrifying them from Corktown Common up to Pottery Road. We're not sure why they're doing this. We think that it might be that they're going to store some electric trains in this area. We've asked them about it. It seems that there might be something around a turnaround or some other sort of operation. But what's happening is the focus is on just that little part called the Don Valley Layover. And they're not giving us the full picture of everything that's happening within the Don Valley from Pottery Road all the way down as one complete unit. When you look at it this way, it literally is one complete unit of operations that they're doing something with. Additionally, they've added in a bunch of fencing that is on the between Bayview and the rails from Pottery Road on south. And what that means is that the public no longer has access to the west side of the river. It's pretty wild in there, but people do go in there and they, hike around and do stuff. So now it's very difficult, almost impossible to get into the access of the west side of the river. So these are all areas that have been affected by what Metrolinx's plan is with this Don Valley complex. Next slide over.
Trying to go back to where we were.
Yes. We'll skip this. We'll come back to it. That piece. So this is straight out of the business case, and it talks about all of the numbers of the benefits. So, public money, about $16 billion, $17 billion is going into building the project. And what Metrolinx has done is to say, okay, we're going to get out of this, the investment is going to reap about $42 billion worth of value back to the public taxpayer. And they've gone through a whole bunch of calculations to determine that. And they've broken it down here. So one of the things I wanted to point out is much of what they talk about is just how environmental this thing is. It's going to be green, it's going to be beautiful, all that stuff. Well, out of the $42 billion worth of benefit, only $330 million actually are about the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. So that's a very, very small fraction of actual ecological benefit. And when you actually look into the details of this 330 million, a whole part of it is the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions from vehicles. The problem is that everything that this is being modeled out to is like 20 or 30 years in the future. 20 or 30 years in the future, vehicles are electric. So we start to point out some of these details and discover that actually the $42 billion worth of value is not really what they are claiming. Most of the value is somehow based on reducing commuter time back and forth into Union Station. Very little of it is actually has anything to do with the environment. Next one, please. So who's being served? So the Don Valley and all of the facilities and all of that there has no benefit for anybody within 5 kilometers of this facility. We were doing a site visit with Metrolinx, and the first thing they said is, well, we have to build transit to benefit, the community around the area. And we asked, what benefit? There's no new train station. There's no new rails for us. There's no Nothing here that is going to actually help any person within 5 kilometers of this facility. It's all these different areas, the red dots that you see, out towards Milton, out towards Barrie, out towards Richmond Hill, and on, that are all being brought in here and basically is being used as a parking lot for suburban trains coming into the downtown core. Now, this is at a time when green space in the urban Toronto is at a premium. And we've noted that other major Canadian cities, for instance, Montreal has Mount Royal Park within walking distance of downtown. Vancouver has Stanley Park within walking distance of downtown. Toronto does not have a park, a large urban park, the same way within walking distance of downtown Toronto. What it's being used for is a parking lot. Next slide, please. And we hear a lot about how wonderful Metrolinx is going to be because it's electrifying the whole grid, and there's the value of two-way service. But the fact is that a lot of the actual expansion is going to be expansion of diesel service. Yes, much of the lakeshore runs are being electrified, and that's great. That's a real benefit to the grid. But the expansion of diesel at this point in time, when we're trying to deal with climate change, is really an actual huge step backwards. In addition to that, there's problems with the fact that this expansion of service out to suburban communities that have not yet been built means that you're increasing not only the greenhouse gas emissions from the diesel trains, you're increasing the the greenhouse gas emissions from the construction of suburbs, all the roads that go in, all the farmland lost. All of this is being compounded by the expansion of diesel. Next slide, please. And then we look at the ridership numbers that are supposed to benefit from this. There's two things. One is they put out there and say, okay, these are the numbers, and they have to model them out to 2055, and it's all these people are going to be basically paying for the operations through their fares. But then all of those numbers come from 2018. And we know that in 2020, we had a pandemic. We still have a pandemic going, by the way. And most of us are operating our businesses as we are right now in this meeting, virtually. So the ridership has dropped to dramatic levels, meaning that the cost per ridership is through the roof. We're talking hundreds and hundreds of dollars to commute people in from the suburbs for one trip. And we don't know when that's going to end. We've asked Metrolinx, can you redo your numbers so that you can remodel this and explain to us how this all is financially going to work? Because we know there's a huge change. People are not going back to work the way that they used to. Much of work is being talked about as being hybrid. So people might come in 3 days a week, 2 days a week, 4 days a week. But the idea that the numbers are going to go back to what it was in 2018 or 2019 are complete nonsense. And so therefore, the whole business model starts to fall apart. Who's going to pay for all of this stuff? Everybody. The taxpayer is going to end up, not only with the $16 billion to build it, but billions and billions operating it forever. Next slide. So we really have three big questions, and Floyd will frickin' frack on this. Have we examined the alternative site? Is it really necessary, this whole Don Valley complex? I mean, can we defer it for a few years until we find out? What else could we do with this site? And how do we evaluate choices? It's not just like this is the only option that we can do. There's other things that could be done with the Don Valley area. Let's have a look. Oh, so this is a beautiful view, right? Everyone loves the valley, and you can see how it connects between the brickworks, across the half-mile bridge, alongside the rails there, down to the well over 100-year-old Prince Edward Viaduct, and then heading down to the lake. It is literally a very, very large, 500 acres approximate size urban park that's just sitting there waiting to be turned into what it can possibly be for all of us. Next slide. Oh, we've seen this one. Let's just power through this. Thanks. And then we get into the actual details here of what the Don Valley Layover part of the complex looks like.
Okay, if you look at the line going uh, bottom to top, is on the bottom it's Danforth, and towards the top it's the Prince Edward Viaduct or Bloor Viaduct. Original Metrolinx told puts out in their blog and their postings that the original plan was to have a 3-track fan display in the bottom of the valley, kind of where it says culvert and ditch to the left side of the picture. Well, I don't know if the engineer had actually graduated from university or not when that was a really bad idea. This is an area that floods extensively, and this really is accessible ravine parkland. So that idea was never made public even from the first public engagement in 2020. The next the adjustment they made, because the first idea was to stick it under the Bloor Viaduct, just tuck it right underneath there. Once again, not really a good idea. It's still sitting in the floodplain. And the other thing is that it makes it really difficult for the City of Toronto to service the Bloor Viaduct and for the TTC to do maintenance on the tracks above. So the last configuration, and this is still all back from early 2021, was to shift it a little bit further north. And you could see that this is no small complex here, with natural gas storage, electric storage, holding tanks, sanitary waste disposal, temporary retaining walls. This is it. Now, the other part of this is to keep the buildings and the holding tanks and the sanitary waste out of the water. They're building a 10-meter high plinth. They call it a plinth or a platform or a base, 10 meters above the trail level. Well, to get their vehicles up there, they have to build a ramp that goes up the 10 meters. The blue dotted line that you see going across there, that's security fencing. And there's another fence. It's hard to tell. It runs along there where it says ditch. We're using Metrolinx photos. They don't always come out very well, but this is unnecessary, an unnecessary reintroduction of industrial operations into a natural feature that has already gotten rid of all industrial operations. The only vestiges of our past industrial history of the polluting industries of the Don Valley is from the 20th century. It's Don Valley Brickworks, and from earlier, from the 19th century, is Todd Morden Mills. Everything else has been removed, restored, and brought back into a more natural space. People have worked really hard to restore this area into an enjoyable park space from what it was. I'll give you an example. Just where it says HV switchgear equipment and transformer, right where that HV is, that's called Chester Springs Marsh. In the 20s, it was a landfill site. Through the 90s and early 2000s, task force to bring back to Don restored this area and bringing in natural plants, trees, creating a small wetland to reclaim the land. This was a big win for the valley. Reclaiming the land was a big win for the valley, and it's a really big win for the community of valley users. And it doesn't matter if you're a biker, a walker, a hiker, a navel gazer, a bird watcher, or whatever, however you enjoy it. This was all a win, and it's going to go away with this reintroduction of this industrial operation. One thing I'd like to point out, that while Metrolinx calls it a layover, this is a service facility. Metrolinx operates a layover at Midland. There are no buildings there. They do not service the trains there. They come on in off-peak hours, and then they go right back out. At a community meeting, one of the Metrolinx spokesmen called, well, we're doing it because it's opportunistic to empty toilets and clean trains here and do light maintenance. Well, I'm sorry, but you know what? I really don't want you to flush your toilet in our green space. Can I have the next slide, please? It's a little complicated on this one. The it's hopefully you can look at it at the as a recording because it doesn't really show very well. But that bright red line right through the center on the left, that's the new track. That's new walkway, new rail bed, new track, and the new trackside service road. If it was just to be a layover, they would not need the walkway or the service road, and it is called a service road. So they will service trains here, contrary to what they say. Um, once again, it's hard to see, but the lighter red line that runs through there is the security fencing. This is 8 foot of high quality nuclear fencing, and it touches right on the trail. And the distance between that fence and the water's edge is 10 meters. It's 10 meters. This is a wildlife migration route, and they make their way up and down the valley in that small 10 meters. Um,
You
so
know,
that's a
another
challenge.
point there, just to point out of the stuff on the right is, this whole where the trains actually park is right up beside the DVP. And although they have the security fence on one side, there's actually no security fence on the other side. So anybody who wants to come in and do their graffiti, which they do in that area quite well actually, can easily slip into the area and start spray painting trains like mad. And of course, because of the elevation, any sort of salt truck that goes down the DVP as they do all winter is going to be spraying salt all over the trains as they're parked there during the day. So, I mean, as your point is made there, Floyd, I mean, what engineer is thinking about sort of how these things are actually going to work?
Well, that you're correct. If back to that to the right side of the photo, if you look at the left side of the right photo, you'll see that there's a retaining wall there, and the what's today is a slope that's fully vegetated. It's a substantial tree canopy. Will be filled in. I mean, we're not making this stuff up, folks. This is real. This is their drawings, and I'm not sure if you can see at the bottom, they haven't changed since 2020. So all the talk about listening to the community and acting on community environmental concerns, nothing has changed. So this is the challenge that we face. This is major.
Although Floyd, remember when Paula Fletcher took Derek Toigo to task at the last council meeting, the question was apparently there is some mysterious change to these plans that have not been made public. So we're waiting to hear from at the next city council meeting what has been changed in this sort of backroom deal. But we don't know.
Next slide, please. Okay, well, we just to bring it up to what we see. The slide on the left is about from the 1950s, looking south from the Bloor Viaduct. You can see it's a pretty open and green space. Not a lot there. The area on the right of the left photo was a landfill, and you could just make out where the water is. Today, at 2021, 2022, looking south from the viaduct, we're seeing this is a pretty green and vibrant environment today. And that's what we see today within that red line. It will go back to looking what it looks like on the left. They cannot construct the new rail bed, new service road, retaining walls without destroying that slope that you see there. So it's a real challenge to maintain this green space, and we all know how critical the green space is as we fight climate change. The carbon sequestration of this area is terrific, especially you see a line of cars on the Don Valley Parkway just spewing out emissions, man. So next slide, please. Because we'll look at it from the one on the left is looking north from the Bloor Viaduct, and this is a little bit later in about 1960, looking north, and you can see that the treed slope has no trees on it, And on the picture on the right, we see that once again, it's green and vibrant and acts, you know what, is what we wanted. But it's taken 60 years, 60 plus years to get from the left to the right. And Metrolinx will turn it back to the left once again because they cannot construct the walkway, the rail bed, the service road without wiping out everything what's in those red lines. Well, months of asking, and even our elected representatives, Peter Tabbins and Paula Fletcher, asking, well, you know, we keep asking where are these alternative sites. Metrolinx finally came around and did up this chart. It's a very nice chart. They told us why they can't do certain things. But three separate people had presented another alternative to that. It doesn't appear on this. So once again, they use their information to their own advantage. There's five different things here. And it probably makes sense. It probably makes sense to Metrolinx to at why these things don't work. There's stuff about laddering, and you can't move a train from one side to the other, and building a portal for the Ontario line, and that kind of stuff. But we did have an alternative for them. Next slide, please. Well, hopefully people, if you think about your drive downtown along Bayview Avenue, and if you look to your left, you'll see an 8-foot chain link fence, 2 to 3 rail tracks, another chain link fence, and a small ribbon of Lower Don Trail. This is one trail. One part of that is unused. Hasn't been unused. It hasn't been used since December of 2000. That's the old Don branch. Let's go to the next slide, please. This will probably be clearer. I'll start bottom up. Those white lines, those 1, 2, 3, 4 white lines that you see down there, those are parked trains in the Don yard. Where the red line is where there are 2 tracks. One is the in-use Richmond Hill line, and that's being in service every day. It would be the track to in this location to the north, and as it goes further up to the west. The other track is the unused Don Branch track, and that is the only way to get from Union Station Rail Corridor, USRC, to the layover facility. The track is there. The track is unused. The track has no other purpose except to take a train from Union Station to the east side of the Don. We've proposed this many times, and they don't respond to it. One of the things that is, well, there's no access from Bayview. I will tell you from personal observation, there are 3 major gates in that chain link fence along Bayview from Eastern Avenue to Coxwell. So like their story is always there. This is a very good place for it. Now, one of the challenges with this remains in the floodplain. If you see Corktown Commons, the part to the east is the wet side. The part to the west is the dry side. Corktown Commons landmass was constructed to keep downtown dry. And yes, the track is there. But it comes back to, in case of a flood, how do you get your trains to the layover if the track is flooded? And the response from Metrolinx was, we have an alternative spot in case of flooding. Question back from us and from Peter Tabbins, if you have an alternative spot during flooding, where is it and why aren't you parking your trains there? Once again, no response. And we're welcome to have Metrolinx. Hopefully there's somebody from Metrolinx on here tonight. We purposely did not invite Metrolinx tonight because we've heard the same story for 24 months. And this is our opportunity to give our version. But if Metrolinx wants to respond, we're very happy to hear from them and how they can relocate the facility. So there is an alternative location. And this does work. The red line doesn't go all the way up, but it would actually go. It would continue up well past Gerard Street.
Yeah, there's actually more storage space in this area than there is up where they're proposing it. North of the Prince Albert viaduct. It's about 800 meters of storage space. This is double. This is 1.6 kilometers of storage space.
That's right, Chris. They could store four trains in a linear fashion along here instead of three. So one of the things on that chart before the Don Yard is that capacity. Part of and there's another one that you can't see in the photo. It's called the Wilson Yard. Then there's a space that lies between it. One space is going to be spoken for the portal for the Ontario line. The other one is spoken for. It's part of the restoration of the mouth of the Don for a debris collection pond offset. So there really isn't, according to Metrolinx, any room south of that red line, but all along that track, all the way up to Gerrard Street, it's certainly wide open. The track is there. It's not being used. Please use it.
Absolutely. This is one of my favorite photos, not because I was on the train at the time, but it really does show you the problem of what the Don Valley can look like. The Don Valley has flooded like 40 times in the last 200 years. It used to have a lot more rail operations going on in the valley until they realized it's really a bad idea to be running trains up and down a floodplain. This actually put commuters at risk. People were jumping out of the trains and trying to swim through the valley. You can see on the left-hand side, the only emergency access was, emergency people in dinghies. At the time of this particular flood, I was up on the Prince Edward Viaduct watching this. And there was ambulance and paramedics in dinghies trying to rescue people out of trees. That's what it looks like. It can look like this when the ground is frozen and you start to get ice jams, and that's happening this week over on the Humber. It can happen very, very, very quickly. So it's not only the Richmond Hill line that they're putting at risk. By building more facilities in the Don Valley, they're actually putting the whole network at risk, because they're going to have trains from all over the place coming in to try and use these facilities. So it's a really, really bad idea. But nonetheless, let's have a look at some more.
What's the challenge to electric trains? It's in 3 feet, 5 feet of standing water.
Listen, I don't know. I mean, again, you sort of come back to ask.
It would be nice to know, wouldn't it?
What engineer is gonna be like? So this is a picture from just a few days ago when we had it wasn't a huge flood, but there is the Richmond Hill line barely above water, and the sidetrack beside it is actually underwater. And the way that they were handling it is they had a guy in a pickup truck sitting there monitoring the situation so that the commuters on the Richmond Hill line were going through very slowly. But again, an ice jam could have happened, and that could have been flooded, triple that amount in a matter of 10 or 15 minutes. This is one of your favorite spots, right? Hellywell Marsh.
Yep. This area was another project by a task force to bring back the Don, restored, and in this view, these are the trees that you see from the Don Valley Parkway. These are the trees that you see looking north from the Prince Edward Viaduct, and it provides a really strong tree cover. But what's very striking about this is that you can actually see where there's no room to put a service road alongside those tracks. That all those trees will have to be gone to put in the service road. It has to be at least 8 meters wide. The service road also has to have the capacity to take a City of Toronto emergency vehicle, such as a heavy fire truck. So it has to be very substantial. But you can't build a road on a slope. I mean, trucks fall off. So that entire tree can is gone. It would be nicer, I guess, if we had one that, not from the fall, but from the summer. But it's a reality of our two-season living here in Toronto. Next, please. Wow, isn't that pretty? Isn't that pretty? Replacing all those trees with this. That's a 10-meter high. That's the 10-meter high, 85-foot long platform to keep those 4 buildings out of the floodplain. Where that green truck is at the bottom is actually in the floodplain, and it's 10 meters top there. Where it looks like that in the middle underneath the arch, that's the ramp that has to go up to there for Metrolinx trucks to get up there. This is our rendering of it. They might do something different. You know what? They said they'll plant trees to cover it. These are the type of trees Metrolinx plants. It will take 60 years for that abomination to be covered and look like a park again. Once again, this parks are no place for a train.
Yeah, well, another point is that the reason why they have this giant sort of wall is to try and keep everything above the floodplain. But when we were down there and we were standing where the blue car is, the question was, isn't the employee parking lot in the 5-year floodplain? And they're like, yes. It's like, so when the flood comes and the employee's sitting there, do they rescue the train or do they rescue their car? And they just shrugged. They're like, well, you know, I guess they're going to pick up their car in Lake Ontario. It's like, really? That's how we do things. Okay.
One of the other
I just have one question from a participant to clarify. Is the layover route the same as a service road? Just do they mean the same thing by that?
No.
So there's sort of 2 service roads. One, there's a service road alongside the layover where the trains are parked, and then there's the service road that you see here, which is the green car area, which was actually more of an access road. But the service route goes alongside the rails to, you know, sort of be able to service the trains. The 3 trains, they have to drop people off, pick people up, drop off equipment for the thing. So they'll be driving alongside the rails.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, thanks.
One of the challenges to constructing this is that Toronto Region Conservation Authority has very strict guidelines of building in or near a floodplain. The foundations must be deeper. They must be a large mass, and that is to keep from regulatory flood, which is a Hurricane Hazel type of 100-year event type of flood, but to keep this mass from actually moving downstream in there. Now, being parallel to water flow is one thing, but that ramp is perpendicular to the water flow and does impede water flow downriver in a flood. If you look from those yellow bollards over, the actual banks of the Don is no more than 15 meters away. So it's this is a very this can be a very flood prone location. Not the right choice. Next slide, please.
Think of it as well from an emergency access. You know, when it is a flood, that is an emergency, and that's the road that you want to be able to drive in. You're not going to be able to drive on it. So the emergency road is no good during emergencies. So here's a question. I mean, it's a broader question. I don't want to spend too much time on it, but you do sort of ask yourself is this whole thing really necessary? Like at the very beginning, like why? One of the things, and there's a question about this in the chat is you know, the projection is around massive development surrounding Toronto in areas like Vaughan and York and Simcoe counties, Milton out there. It is being driven over a long period of time. Decades worth of planning is going into this, and it's basically saying all of the biggest developments are going to be happening out there. And now we start to hear, well, hold on a second. The province is starting to say, well, what about transit-oriented development right in Toronto itself? Maybe that's a better place to actually build up density. And it's like, it actually makes more sense. You already have transit. You already have highways. You already have all of the things that make neighborhoods neighborhoods. So why are we trying to build up all these greenfield developments, which have massive amounts of impact on greenhouse gas emissions and the loss of farmland? Again, I pointed out earlier, the ridership is supposed to mainly pay for this. And of course, environmental concerns. When we look at the algorithms that they put together to calculate these greenhouse gas emissions, they didn't include all the concrete that needs to be poured and put into every single piece of the parking lots that are being built out all over the place. all of the bridges that need to be built, everything. It's not built into the actual algorithms and the calculations that they've done. So they're not doing a really good job. What they're doing with the calculations is basically sort of a cover your ass from a perspective of selling through to their political masters that this is a good idea. Next slide, please.
You know, Chris, last fall, the Ontario government made the Don Valley and other waterways part of the Greenbelt.
Mhm.
But they also keep pushing for the 413 highway and the Bradford bypass through the Greenbelt. So they say one thing on one side and they do something else on the other. If it should be a protected resource, then they should be protecting the resource.
Mhm. So when we compare what is possible versus what is being proposed, one of the things that we've always thought about is how could we make more use of this lower Don Valley as a more sort of nature conservation area. We've seen how the brickworks has turned into a massive attraction to explain and rehabilitate the area and get people, out of their apartments and come down and go to the farmers market or go for a hike and go bird watching in the valley. That's a real huge success. We should be expanding on that, and we should be looking at the rail trail that goes from Corktown Commons all the way up past the brickworks and up to the Loblaws at Redway, which is the actual CP Don branch. This is a huge opportunity for the city, for the province, and for federally as well, to look at the value of what happens when we actually start investing in real green infrastructure, and getting people from down into the valley, go hiking, go walking, go cycling, go rollerblading, whatever. Those things have massive health benefits that can be quantified. And it actually does generate and save billions of dollars worth of taxpayer money when people are healthier mentally and physically. So these are the kinds of things that you start saying, well, why are we not looking at it from that perspective and saying, how much money could the government save by actually creating this sort of rail trail versus actually just putting a bunch of trains in the green space? And that is really sort of what we try and bring it to just say we're not just against transit or it's not NIMBYism. What we're trying to say is there are choices at the table, and we have to look at them. We have to quantify them. We have to think of it from a business perspective, and we have to make the right choice. Next slide. So that's where we started thinking about, well, why not build out the Wascotnach Trail as a rail trail? Perhaps you've seen these spray painted on the side of the rails. And go out and walk it and see what it actually looks like, and think about what it could be if we save those trees and if we planted more native species, and if we were able to take that trail from Corktown Common all the way up to the brickworks as a way of getting people to understand what the Don Valley could actually be, in the same way that Mount Royal Park is for Montreal or Stanley Park is for Vancouver. Why are we not thinking of it that way? Next slide.
Well, okay, hang on one sec.
Okay.
One of the things that Thomas has done, we're not very big on introducing any additional necessary infrastructure or monetizing the valley. But one of the things about the Wascotnach Trail is that it's pretty environmentally friendly. The trail is already there. You fill in between those rails with some granular, so we don't have surface runoff. And the only major expense would be getting over the half-mile bridge, which would have to be refurbished and obviously made a lot safer. This is an environmentally friendly and very cost-effective way to have people enjoy precious green space in right downtown Toronto.
And it's not very wide. It doesn't have huge impact, and it actually connects some really important features in the Don Valley from the very further south at Corktown Common, where the games were, all the way across the lower rail bridge. Of course, at the lower rail bridge, many people aren't aware of actually how old that trail is. That's well into the tens of thousands of years old, that trail, where the old railway bridge is. That's where Davenport Road that would connect the indigenous settlement that was at Withrow and Broadview, that connected over to Babby Point along the Davenport Trail 10,000 years ago. So that whole story is in danger of being lost just because we're not paying attention to what's actually happening on the ground.
Now, I'd like to point something out. Chris took it on himself. The federal government for new urban parks, and Chris took it on himself to inquire about that, to find out why can't we make the Don River Valley Park and the Don Valley a national urban park. And Chris, if I'm correct, said, well, Toronto already has an urban park in the Rouge Valley. Is that correct?
That was what I heard back from the
Yeah.
initial response was, but the thing is,
I live downtown Toronto. It's a long way to the Rouge Valley for me, and for a lot of people that rely on transit or other ways to get around. So it's a terrific idea, and one that should be looked at by the federal government.
well, for sure. I mean, there's considerable funding, and for good reasons. There's a lot of funding going into this green infrastructure. It has to be placed in the right areas so that it can be accessible to hundreds of thousands of people that live in the area, and many of them, of course, are in very dense areas on the west side of the valley. And if they're going to be monster apartments at East Gerrard and new ones coming in at Broadview Danforth, people need green space. How are you going to get to it? You can't walk to the Rouge Valley Park from downtown Toronto. It's a 7-hour walk.
Well, we planned this to be an hour of presentation and try to leave time for your questions, and we're pretty on track. So to wrap up, in summary, what can be done? And I'll tell you, this is the hard part. It really is. It kind of worked. I was like, what are we going to do? And it's because we're up against a formidable foe, and Metrolinx is that formidable foe, with who's totally enabled by the Conservative cabinet. So, but in their strength, they show very little disregard for community or environmental concerns, and we see this in with other communities that have a challenge with Metrolinx plans. The above ground Ontario line above ground through Leslieville, the Smalls Creek, which is a tragedy. Total disregard for city council. A unanimous motion to don't do the work. It's just please hold off on the early works until a restoration plan. This was the ask. A restoration plan can be put in place before you start cutting down the trees. The very next day, after unanimous decision by Toronto City Council, they cut down all the trees, including 100-year-old oaks and maples. Metrolinx strategy is designed to deceive the public, and including city officials. They tell them what they want to hear, and they're not our elected representatives who are a lot smarter, but a lot of our some of the city staff are just rubber stamped for Metrolinx. And from my experience with this layover, with liaison with people at Smalls Creek, the sign behind me, the people at Save Jimmy Simpson, Save Tea Park, PAC, they act in this authoritarian manner, and they rarely reverse their decisions even when incorrect. But I put the word in rarely because they did reverse a decision. The Yonge Street extension to Richmond Hill through public outcry was rerouted. The challenge with that is a fully conservative riding. The ridings that are along the Don Valley are the two other parties. So there isn't the political will at cabinet level to reverse the decisions when it comes to the layover. It's a very sad state of affairs when public employees have to be afraid of their employer. So what can we do? Well, you know what? We'd like you to write to Premier Ford. Whatever's in the chat, say, hey man, do it. Transportation Minister Carolyn Mulrooney, Metrolinx CEO Phil Verster, who's quoted as saying, "We've been given a mandate. We will fulfill that mandate." You could put the ... after that, and because it says, "Who gives a crap about what the citizens of Toronto have to say?" Mayor John Tory, who spoke out in 2017 about the Don River Valley Park, and then has been quiet about it. The Toronto Transit Expansion Office General Manager Derek Twigo, who is supposed to move projects along, but once again is a rubber stamp for Metrolinx. These people all should be hearing from you, because they certainly have heard from Chris and myself, from Paula Fletcher and Peter Tabbins and Mike Layton and Jessica Bell and Julie DeBrusen and other people that are concerned about this. But we need help on that one. But what else you could do? Well, support the creation of a true Don Valley rail path. For more information, go to www.oncecontact. I always mix this up, trail.ca. And you could see that this is a viable alternative than putting a diesel train service station in accessible ravine parkland. Help us out, purchase a lawn sign to support the efforts of the community to locate the facility out of the accessible ravine parkland. And you know what? Join us at future rallies, and if it comes to it, future demonstrations as well. It might actually take that little bit of civic pride to stand there in front of the tractor and that chainsaw before it cuts down a tree. I'm in. Who's going to join me? So I guess we could open it. Chris, unless you have something else, maybe we could open up for questions.
No, I'm sort of looking at some of the chat questions and things like this. And
okay.
Yeah, I've actually been taking notes of the chat questions. So because some of the earlier questions were very good ones, and I just wanted to make sure that we can address some of these. So I don't know if you are okay with that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, any questions that people have brought up, we should absolutely address.
Okay. Cool. Yeah, I have about 8 or 9 here. So the first question is, how much of the full scope is part of the current tender that you mentioned is going to be closing this week?
Oh, that's an exciting one, because we tried to get the tender documents, but they're not quite available to us. And the tendering system is called MERX. You have to apply, you have to pay some money, you have to be a corporation, and so clearly
we didn't qualify.
We didn't qualify, and so you sort of where's the public oversight of what's being put to tender, especially when it doesn't line up with what has been released on the public documents that.
Well, what was informative about it? It was, as I said previously, it was the first time anybody had seen that the low steel bridge from over the Don River would be replaced, not reinforced, not refurbished, replaced. I mean, and that's what one of the questions that I have, and that I know Peter Tabbin's office has asked Metrolinx, what's the expected cost of this? What is the expected cost of this entire unnecessary facility? And as usual, because they're not the party in power, they don't get responded to.
Hold on. I'm just going to stop sharing. Okay, so is there a reason why the existing layover yard to the east of Union can't be expanded to accommodate this handful of trains?
Yes. There is some valid reasons to that. Because the rails that are coming out of Union Station are on the north side of that parking lot yard, is in order to get to where they could actually park the trains, they would have to cross many of the different other rails, and it becomes very complicated when you have many trains that are coming in and out of Union Station, and one is on the north side trying to get to the south side. But that doesn't mean that that train has to, go up to the Prince Edward Viaduct. It can stay on the north side of all of that rail yard. There's other questions, like for instance, we've heavily pointed out that they could run up and be along Bayview. I mean, other questions come to the fore of, if GO expansion is all about two-way all-day service, why are they parking trains in the first place? The trains actually create value when they're moving people. There's no value in parking a train. And so the train that comes into Union Station from Milton, why does it not carry on up to Richmond Hill and pick up people along the way and dump them off there? And the train that comes from Richmond Hill could go out to Milton. That's how it works at Union Station. The TTC figured that out a long, long time ago. So many questions, so few answers is what it comes down to.
I think the provincial Liberals had proposed all-day service to Milton, which would make this facility irrelevant, because the trains would, just as you said, be going back, and they'd be in motion and be revenue generators. So instead of sitting around. So there was another thing about the facility that the representative from Metrolinx had told us, is that the when we asked why are they servicing trains here, well, the Midland one wasn't, and he called it opportunistic. Well, I think I mentioned this earlier, is that, please, you know what, our green space is not opportunistic. The bunnies and the squirrels and the rabbits and stuff, need some place to live.
I have another question, which is a really good one. Who is Metrolinx accountable to? Transportation Minister Caroline Mulroney?
We're both laughing. God and country is that's being facetious, but you know what? I don't believe they're accountable to anybody except for Ford cabinet.
And the government, I mean, generally the government, because some of this did start earlier. Under the Liberal government, was initiated sort of to think through what regional rail could be. I think one of the things that we have to always be clear about is that there's good transit and there's bad transit. And when we look at things like the expansion of electric trains in dense areas servicing existing communities, that is good transit. The electric trains can move faster, they can hold more people, they can stop and start more quickly, they can service more stations. That's good transit. Bad transit is when you take a diesel train and start expanding it out into farmland, into places like Gormley. There is nothing there. There's cows. And so you say, why are we expanding and spending all this money to service, future subdivisions that are going to cause the loss of farmland and just more pollution problems?
What is the total area that will be cleared?
To be honest, we don't know, because we've only seen the plans as they are right now, which we've shown you the renderings, and we've seen the plans that are on the public space. But apparently there's some new design or some new thing that Derek Toyo was talking about at the last city council meeting. And we don't expect that it's going to get any better. We clearly think that it's just sort of more reshuffling of whatever to try and make it look like they're responding to the community. But the fact is, the original plan didn't include the bridge. It didn't include the lower CP Don branch and all the rails that have to be replaced up to there. So we really don't know.
What criteria did Metrolinx use to evaluate alternative locations?
You need to go back to that one slide, that box from the Metrolinx website. It's okay. A little blue box on one of the slides.
Nope. There's the email.
There.
So,
which one did you say?
Oh, I'm trying to move it and I can't.
There.
Right there, number 17.
Yeah, I think that needs a little bit of explanation what this
Yeah, well, when we asked, like, okay, like, what are the alternative sites for 14 months, we didn't get any response. Then they came back. Then they finally came back with this, and they looked at. So if you see existing yards, Don Wilson, those are the two that people see from if they're on the Gardner Expressway, under expansion and capacity assigned. Yes, Chris just mentioned that. Yeah, it's going to be full. Bathurst Yard at capacity, and it's the wrong side of Union Station. It's the west side of Union Station. Milton, at the end of the line, it's moving an empty train back and then coming down with an empty train and going back with people. It's not really. It's probably not a financially good idea.
But what are the
Willowbrook.
criteria though? That's how do they
This
evaluate
this
it?
is theirs. You know what? Like for us is like put it somewhere else. Like the trains that go back to
Our
Milton in
criteria,
the
their
evening are
criteria. Didn't
servicing
they put
Milton
that
during the
somewhere
day.
out?
So
Pardon?
what I think is happening here is you're right to ask what are the criteria to really understand, and what they're actually looking for is excuses not to do these things. So they're trying to find what is the excuse not to do this, and then what's the excuse not to do that. And really, you know, what we're super lucky in the fact that we have somebody who loves to look at the details of what Metrolinx is up to and point out all the ridiculous things that they managed to put together. And that's Steve Monroe. He does a phenomenal job on his website of going into the details of the financials, the operations, the planning, and pointing out, and he's done this on the Ontario line, and getting into sort of what are the best practices in terms of building transit and where is Metrolinx falling short. And he also does a good job of pointing out, you know, some of the biggest challenges that they have in building these monster projects. And he has written about the Don Valley Layover, and he's done a fantastic job of it. And you know, I hope to God that he continues, you know, examining it in detail to help us understand, you know, what actually are the alternatives that are possible and possibly even cheaper.
Who is the key contact at Metrolinx?
CEO Phil Verster. You want
Yeah,
his address?
yeah. Although, I mean, we've been writing to the board of directors actually,
Yes.
you know, because Phil's on the board. And so you get the nice opportunity not only to write to Phil, but you also get the chance for the board of directors to be looking at Phil going, like, what the hell are you thinking here? Like, you know, in some cases, you know, Phil is up there presenting, you know, building a service facility instead of a mosque. And they're sitting there going, geez, that sounds like a terrible idea. I mean, I know in the last board meeting, which was last week, you know, I believe the Thorncliffe Park people issued a fatwa against Metrolinx. You know, they went as far as Islamic jurisprudence to say, what the heck is going on here?
What you're
You
thinking
know,
about.
and so you know, I always write a letter to the board of directors. They've got an email address; they're easy to find, and sometimes they write you back.
If they don't give you the answer that you want, they'll write you back. You know,
Well,
they
they'll
will
write you back,
continue to
but yeah,
give
you don't
the
get the
answer that
answer.
they want you to do. It's for this facility, their narrative has not changed in 24 months.
You know,
Like
and sadly, here's
presentation has, but not the words.
the board of directors really for Metrolinx should include public. You know, there should be some representatives of the public that are actually going to represent the riders of the system and the taxpayers. Right now, it's a bunch of real estate people and rail fans. You know, so they're not doing the due diligence that a board of directors should be doing. They're basically, you know, coughing up the numbers that make the government happy.
And what about community relations or contacts? Like, who can people best contact at Metrolinx?
You
Oh,
can, I
David
mean, you can
Falp is
contact
a
them. They don't.
wonderful person to talk to.
Who
Who?
is which one?
David Falp.
David Feld.
David?
Yep. He's the point. He's the point guy. He takes all the abuse and
Yeah.
it must be a tough job because he's never talking to an audience that appreciates what he has to do, because most of the people in the audience don't appreciate being lied to. So Chris and I were at a community meeting that almost didn't happen, and he went through it's like I said, it's the same narrative, went through the same motions, and the reality is it really annoys people not to be told the truth, right? And to be the disinformation, and in a lot of cases outright lies, and to be told this is going to be good for you.
What is David's surname? David
Phalps, Phalps. And you know what, Irene, we could put get this all these contact
people are really
emails
dying to get in
together
contact with.
tomorrow and post them on social media. How's that? It won't be till tomorrow afternoon, people, but we'll try to get a list of contact people. Write these people. You know what? As much as they annoy us, let's annoy them.
Next question. Who owns the proposed alignment and development envelope? Is the city willing to expropriate for protective purposes?
The city has no legal recourse to stop Metrolinx.
That's right, yeah. And Metrolinx bought this this alignment quite a few years ago, along with a piece of land out in Oakville.
Wow. Okay. How much has been invested in the naturalization of the mouth of the Don as stormwater management strategy?
Billions.
Billions.
Okay. Yeah. I asked the waterfront guys, is what they're doing at the mouth of the Don, is that going to sort of like open it up so that there's going to be less flooding upstream from what they're doing? They're like, no. Everything they're doing is it's a fantastic, beautiful plan, massive infrastructure. And then, of course, you also have the stormwater management thing that you see over at on the Rosedale side, where what used to be the soccer field for the high school. I mean, those are all great things because it's going to clean up the environment. But what's happening, of course, is we all know that water flows downhill. So you've got bad things happening upstream, heading down towards these multi-billion-dollar projects where they're trying to naturalize the mouth of the Don. But we should be naturalizing the whole river all the way up because it's kind of all connected.
Next question. Is there any legal basis for preventing Metrolinx from their development?
So Metrolinx is operating under the Metrolinx Act, and part of that was to push the TRCA out of the way. So the TRCA became a consultant, not a permitting operation. And then there's another act called the Building Transit Faster Act, which basically just accelerates the whole process because they're tired of community involvement, really. And so basically what's happened is the province, which is very much in control of this whole thing, has let Metrolinx loose on us as a city to develop all of these different lines. It's kind of interesting because you look at their advertising and their tagline is "It's happening." I mean, that's a tagline from a horror movie, right?
Whether you want it or not.
Yeah, it's inflicting transit on citizens might be a better one, but it really is the pent up demand to build a lot of transit very quickly. The frustration over the years of trying to get transit built in Toronto has sort of accumulated to the point where something has to be done, but it has to be done smartly, and you just can't throw money at the situation and steamroll everything. There's a question here. Are there Indigenous rights that are in play that have not been included in the assessments? Yeah, there is. They have to go through a process where they do environmental assessments. They have to reach out to the Indigenous groups that previously lived in these areas, and so they go through the motions, but I don't think that there has been a proper amount of engagement on this thing, and there's and that is a really, really difficult and point, because the area of the Don Valley has been settled for 12,000 years. And there's a lot of stuff that was down there that has been dramatically disturbed, right? When you think of from an archaeological perspective, um, you know, one of the things is just go to Broadview and Withrow. That is Canada's first archaeological dig. They found a settlement from 7,000 years ago, and what's there right now is like a 3 by 6 inch brass plaque. And you know, this is the kind of thing that's just a national disgrace, that needs to be fixed. And what is happening in the Don Valley right now is not fixing it. It's continuing to head in the wrong direction. And we really need to address that in a comprehensive way, and do it sensitively. So that we're talking about what is the history, but also what is the current context of what is the story that Toronto is going to tell the world. Because right now, if you're a visitor to Toronto, there are 10 publicly funded museums, and not one of them has anything to do with anything before 1790. And that is the story that we're telling. And I believe that in the Don Valley, we should have a national federal park that talks about the whole history of this area, starting from much longer ago, and represents everybody who's been here.
Is Evergreen speaking out about this, or not allowed to, or doesn't want to? What is their stance?
Well, you know what? Not only myself, but know 4 of the people that have written to Evergreen. My personal belief is that Evergreen should be the loudest and should be the most vocal voice in opposition to this train facility in the Don River Valley Park. Since 2015, Evergreen has, along with the city, has pushed for the Don River Valley Park. The city of Toronto has invested somewhere up to $16 million. Some of those facilities we see, the Bayview Multi-Use Trail, the pedestrian bridge at Pottery Road, some public art installations, both permanent and temporary. But Evergreen is silent. And the form letter came back, and because it's pretty well the same to all 4 of us, was it is a concern. But they have a lot of skin in the game. They have a lot of donor money that was put into the Don River Valley Park. They have hundreds, if not thousands, of hours of volunteer hours that is just getting wasted because they're not vocal and they don't say anything. And again, I'm going to give you my personal opinion, is that I think Evergreen and their CEO, Jeff Cape, is waiting for some concession from Metrolinx, and that's why they're silent. Might not be, you know, I believe that. And I would certainly to object to any backroom deals that Metrolinx makes with any organization that doesn't represent the interest of the Don Valley, such as Evergreen, for their own personal interests. So it's a sore point with me, as I guess you can tell. They should be the most vocal voice out there. Like, you know what? They have a lot of political pull. They can pick up the phone. Jeff Cake can pick up the phone today and call Phil Verster or Carolyn Mulroney or John Tory, and they'll take the call. They're not taking those people aren't taking a call from Chris Williams or Floyd Ruskin. So write to Evergreen. Tell them you're disappointed. Every one of you. I'll give you that. 550 Bayview Avenue. And we need to not forget that Evergreen has moved to a commercial event space. It is not a green organization any longer. So just keep that in mind when you enjoy the farmer's market or your $1 million bar mitzvah.
Is there a date by which the public needs to take action regarding this? Is there like a deadline for public consultation or so?
There isn't a date that I know of the sort of like the next public consultation with Metrolinx. All I know is that the next council meeting, there's something on the agenda around Derek Toigo coming back with some kind of report. And I believe that Paula Fletcher, who's done an amazing job of spearheading this, is arranging a site visit with John Tory. That's my understanding. So I hope that that happens. If it does, let's go down and visit and have a good chat to talk about what this thing could be.
So, yeah, I don't believe that people could actually envision uh, the amount of devastation to the green space that will happen until they walk around there and see it. One of the things that Metrolinx likes to run out, and they did it with Smalls Creek and with the Lakeshore East line, is they continue to mention invasive plants and invasive trees, and we're doing the community a favor. Well, devastation and destruction, wiping out the entire tree canopy and the wildlife habitat that it supports is not a reason for removing that tree canopy. A more positive stewardship initiative would actually fix the invasive plant and tree problem, just like Don't Mess with the Don has done and partnered with Toronto Nature Stewards to look after it. I don't think very many people I hear know that from Pottery Road north, just like to Beechwood, there's 6 different stewardship sites. In fact, excuse me, there's one. There's a City of Toronto Community Stewardship at Riverdale Park East. I apologize to the wonderful people that look after that. But there's one at Beechwood. There's a Toronto Nature Steward site just north of the lime kiln at Beechwood. Toronto Field Naturalists have one at Cottonwood Flats. It's a bird monitoring site. And Don't Mess with the Don is up in another area of Crothers Woods called Sun Valley. So invasive plants and trees is not an invitation for destruction. It should be an invitation for community engagement and stewardship. And we totally support that and do everything we can to get more boots on the ground to look after the problem of invasive plants and trees.
I think there was also at some point a question about what role does the press play into this? Is there anything that we can do to leverage the press to draw attention to this matter?
There's an article today in the Toronto Star by Thorben Waits. It's specific to the Don Valley, but more about the way Metrolinx works with different works with communities and the communication strategy. That's his business. We've been on there. Whether it's a publication like BlogTO, but nationally, Globe and Mail, Toronto Star, all the TV channels, they've all put it out there. But if you have somebody that wants to listen to us, if somebody out there, someone who wants to listen to us, Chris or myself or Irene, we'll be happy to talk to them. We even more happy to take them out and let them feel and touch and smell what's going to be lost. And I think that's the real thing. You have to actually touch it.
Sure.
You've got to feel it. You've got to see that rabbit warren, or the rabbit tracks in the snow, or the coyote tracks, or the deer, or you know what, a kid cradling a toad in their hand because they live in St. Jamestown, have never seen anything like it. So that's feeling and touching and very emotional and very visceral. We talk about numbers and track and this side of the river and that, but touch it, smell it, feel it. Embrace it.
But does the press have any kind of use in this? Like,
yes, yeah, absolutely.
Leverage, like does Metrolinx even listen to, or do they, pay any attention to that?
Well, I mean, there was the scandal of Metrolinx hiring private individuals and giving them VP titles, and giving them the latitude to make decisions, that basically are
in their own company's contracts,
and stuff like that. And you say, well, this is the kind of value that the press brings to the table of oversight of the government, holding their feet to the fire. And so, first of all, read Ben Spur of the Toronto Star and if you're not a subscriber, subscribe and tell them that the reason why you want to subscribe is you want to understand what's going on in your own city with civic politics, provincial politics, and that that money goes to employing that person who's going to actually write about transportation, and all the nonsense that's going on. I think we're almost at 8:30 here, so I
Yeah.
think we should sort of, if there's one
more
last
question and then wrap it up.
Is there a merit to us raising funds to conduct a fairer study of the impacts of this project to allow us to have a more formal data to put up against the broad inaccurate Metrolinx statements?
That's a possibility.
Also
It would be
talking
interesting
about
to,
the people who designed, the architects of the new mouth of the Don, whether if they look at this, if they can make any sense of this.
so I mean, it would depend on if we're looking at the numbers, like the ridership numbers, the forecasts, and the actual business. Are we asking for auditors to get involved and pull it apart? I mean, that would be really interesting because it might tear the need out of this, so to say that you don't actually need to build this, and then you send it off to the auditor general to say, look at all the taxpayer dollars that are being wasted. That's one approach. I mean, alternatively, it could be an assessment that says what is the value of what is being lost, sort of like what I was talking about with Vancouver and the value of a park, the value of the green space relative to the revenue or the non-revenue that's being generated by this layover. So yeah, it's a good idea.
You know what, Chris? We never talked about. It's something that Julie DeBruson had mentioned to us months ago. Was the cumulative effect of all this infrastructure being done in the Don Valley at the same time? Within, I would say, 6 kilometers, there's 7 major infrastructure projects. We'll start with the mouth of the Don. There's a Lakeshore Boulevard new bridge that's going in there. The Lakeshore East bridge extension to carry the extra tracks. We have now we have the replacement of the low steel bridge. We have 2 Ontario line bridges a little further north. We have the ongoing Don River and Central Waterfront Wet Weather Flow Program. That's a City of Toronto program. And it was just announced last week that the City of Toronto has plans to rebuild the Overlea Bridge to Don Mills, to widen the bridge and make it safer for bicycles, and especially the very narrow sidewalks there. So that's about 7 or 8 kilometers from the mouth of the Don up, all happening at the same time. Each one of those has its own environmental assessment, but none of those environmental assessments looks about what happens with its neighbor to the north, the neighbor to the south, or the 5 even further south. Unfortunately, like Chris wrote a very good request for impact environmental assessment, and the federal government environment minister had turned it down. It also had an endorsement from our MP, Julie DeBruson, which we're very appreciative of, but I guess we should find out if we should do it again, because it just added 2 more river crossings to that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So,
we've also written a request for the the National Urban Park Program to look at
yes.
it, so that we can create like a comprehensive plan here, sort of, which would include all the various construction elements, but also what are the restoration elements and the remediation, and what other sort of things that need to be there to actually turn it into the kind of park that they've outlined in the mandate letters to all of the different ministers.
Yeah. One thing that the City of Toronto ravine strategy is, it does point out that gray infrastructure, which is hard construction, railways, roads, will happen. Will happen. We're not on the moon here. It's things will have to happen. There's sewer connectors that have to be done. As I said, the very important storm connector is part of that as well. But when things are unnecessary and there's other locations, as in this particular case, there is another location, and a much less expensive one. present Ford government, like the Ford government, we're putting money in your back in your pocket. We're not going to charge you, your car registration fee. You know what? What did you think about saving $50 or $100 million on an unnecessary layover facility?
Well, I think we're kind of closing out here, and any other questions you can send to info@don'tmesswiththedon.ca, and it reaches us automatically, at least me and Floyd, and we can forward anything to Chris as well. And I thank you so much for everybody participating and asking your questions and giving input. We will make this presentation available later on our website, and we'll post it on social media as well. So yeah, this was really great. Thanks so much. Thanks, Floyd, and thanks, Chris.
And thank you everyone for attending and spending an hour and a half with us.
Yeah, and I hope that maybe because of this, we'll be able to join forces and at least delay and change ultimately what is happening, what they're planning to do. Bye, guys. I'm gonna close now.
Lost the button.